Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm diving into the 6 tools that I think really elevate your knitting experience. And quite honestly, I don't think I can live without. So grab a cup of something and let's dive in. Hey friends, welcome back. If you've been knitting for a while, or even if you're just getting started, you've probably figured out that the right tools can really make this craft a game changer. And so today I'm going to share my 6 non-negotiable knitting supplies, the ones that I reach for time and time again, that again really help elevate the experience for me. So if you're looking to maybe upgrade some of your tools or you're just plain curious, let's talk about it. So the first tool that I think is a non-negotiable once you become an avid knitter or crocheter is the ball winder and the Swift. Now, my setup is a little bit more elaborate, but it's definitely not where I started. So my Swift has these beautiful these yarn squirrel cages, and there's one at the bottom, and I open up that hank of yarn and drape it through and wind it up. Now, this is handcrafted, and I would never expect anyone to spend hundreds of dollars. These retail for, I think, about $450 now. For me, I wind yarn frequently enough that I didn't want something that I was constantly having to take down. This one has a really nice aesthetic, and since it pretty much lives in my living room full time, it just made sense to find one that was really aesthetically pleasing, that kind of fit the vibe of the room. But for a Swift and a winder, you don't need to buy the most expensive one out there. What I will say is that buying a Swift and the winder really is a game changer in the simple fact that it makes winding your yarn so much easier and faster. No more making your spouse or your child hold a hank of yarn open while you hand wind, or no more draping it over the back of, say, 2 kitchen or dining room chairs and pulling them apart so the yarn's taut, and again, winding by hand. So instead of taking like an hour to wind a 100-gram skein of yarn by hand, you can usually get it wound in about 5 minutes with the help of a Swift and a winder. Now, some people will argue that your local yarn shop can do this, and they absolutely can. Most will do it free of charge, but let's say you've bought the hank of yarn at, say, a fiber festival. A lot of yarn shops are going to charge you a small nominal fee for having them wind it. Some may not. It kind of varies from place to place, but winding yarn does take time, and sometimes when you're in your local yarn shop, I know many of them during a sale, they can't wind yarn. So then you've got to go back and get it if you've left it with them, or you have to go back with the yarn and wait for it to be wound then. So having your own really does make those spur of the moment cast on projects so much easier. Now, you can buy a really inexpensive plastic yarn winder. I want to say they retail for about $30 these days, maybe a little more depending upon where you're purchasing it. And I think we all start there. And then I know many people graduate to this large Stanwood Swift, and I have looked it up. It's not a Swift, it's the winder. So this is called the Stanwood Needlecraft Large Metal Ball Winder. And this retails on average, like on Amazon right now, it is $82. So you're probably going to pay about that much. You can find other winders. You can find some really nice wooden crafted ones at your local yarn shop, but be prepared to spend around $100, maybe a little bit more, for those really nice handcrafted ones. I really like this Stanwood one because though this part is plastic, everything else is, for the most part, metal. It will allow me to wind a larger ball of yarn. So if you've got those chunkier yarns, you're not going to get much wider than the base. So it's really helpful for that. Now, there are a couple of different options for the Swift. Again, mine is kind of a luxury piece, but there are a couple of different options. You can go with what's called an umbrella Swift. These are the type, they're usually made of wood, and they clamp onto the edge of, say, your table surface, and they open up like an umbrella based on the circumference of your yarn hank. I had one of those. I don't think I do anymore. I do own what's called an Amish Swift. This is one that will sit on the table. It comes apart. It has crosshairs that you plug these little pegs into, and then you can drape the circumference of your yarn, and it nicely spins as you crank your Swift. I loved the tabletop one. Stanwood does make one. It retails for about $45. And what I loved about it is that it broke down into really slim pieces. So I can't say I traveled with it, but I could have. It would easily fit in a suitcase if I wanted it to, but it was easy to put away and didn't take up a ton of space. And it also, I didn't need to clamp it to anything. I could just put it down on the table or the floor and use it that way. So the ball and winder is my number one tool that I use probably most frequently, particularly when I'm starting a new project. My next favorite tool that I think is a game changer is a small scale. This is what I refer to as like a micro scale. You can definitely use a kitchen scale if you have one, but you can easily find these small precision scales. I think they run anywhere between like $8 and $15 if you're on Amazon, and some of them even come with a nice little tray, but I can measure in ounces, I can measure in grams. This is really helpful for when I'm testing patterns for designers. I can weigh how much yarn that I have left over so that I know exactly how much yardage or how many grams of yarn I have actually used, particularly if I'm using multiple colors. Designers really need precise numbers. Other opportunities that I have used this is when I measure a skein. Maybe I've got a mini skein. I measure it or I weigh it before I start a project. And then after I've done, let's say, that blanket square or that section of something, then I can weigh it again and see how much of it did I use, how much do I have left. If I was doing blanket squares, particularly if you're doing things like the Blankets or Pillows by Laura Penrose that have those quilt looks, you could weigh the mini skein, do the one block, weigh it again, see if you have enough grams to actually do a second block, depending upon your gauge. So I find these micro precision scales to be invaluable. And if you buy one that is meant like this versus a small kitchen scale, this will really allow you to tuck it away. So while I keep this in a tools pouch that I just I have here at my home, there are times where I take it out of that and slip it down in my project bag if I know I'm going to be traveling and I might want to utilize it. But I think this is a game changer when you need to have some precision in your knitting and you need to know how much yarn you're using, particularly in color work. It also comes in handy if you're playing yarn chicken in the end and you're just not sure. So I know some people, when they're shawl knitting, will do a few rows and then they will weigh it, do another row, weigh it again, then they have an idea of how many grams did they use. And then they have a rough idea of how many more rows can they do? So sometimes when you're working on things and you're just not sure if you're going to have enough yarn, or if you're going to have enough yarn to do that extra row. The next tool that I can't live without are blocking mats and pins. Now, I will admit I have 2 sets of blocking mats. These are by Knit Picks. They retail for about $25. You get 9 of them in the set. So I have 2 sets because I block a lot of sweaters, and I also tend to lay things outside. So I don't want anything touching the ground. So I will incorporate a second set with them. They are lightweight, they are foam, and then they are meant for pins to go in them. You can also buy these same foam mats in the children's department, like in the children's toy department, because many parents will put these down in play areas to cushion falls for infants and toddlers. Now, you can use straight pins, you can use the blocking T-pins. I choose to use the Knitter's Pride blocking combs. Now, when you open them, you have a series of large ones, and then you have these tinier ones. I prefer these because I don't like the tediousness of individual T-pins. Now, I will say that like most sewing supplies, blocking pins and blocking T-pins are meant to not rust so that we're not damaging our knits by sticking these pins into wet fabric. So it is definitely a good resource. These also retail for about $25. I think because they're stainless and they're rust resistant, most local yarn shops, if they don't have these, they will definitely have the individual T-pins that you can use. But again, these are my favorite. I think blocking is incredibly important for most items that we knit. Or crochet. I don't do socks, but it just kind of opens up lace work. It evens the tension in your yarn, so everything kind of looks the same, and it just gives your garments or your knit or crochet pieces, it really just kind of gives everything this really nice, polished, professional look. So it is well worth taking the time to block your items. And the beauty of these is they are reusable, and the pins are going to allow you to lay things out and pin them exactly how you want them to dry. So they are a game changer when you're creating, particularly pieces that you want that polished look for. All right, so the next game changer is a neck lamp. And yes, I said a neck lamp. So I have a few of these. I even buy cases for them so I can travel with them, stick them down in my backpack or my knitting bag if I know I'm going to be knitting somewhere in dim lighting and then I'm not accidentally hitting the power button. So they are USB. They come with a USB charger. I love them. I use them for reading at night, like when I've gone to bed as well. So there's always one next to the bed. There's always one next to the sofa on the end table. But you have 3 different levels on each side. They're a bendable cord, so they really make it so that you can get that light onto your knitting during the nighttime, or if you're like me and you just have some really old eyes, they just really take the strain off of knitting, particularly if you're trying to knit with dark yarn. Now, I know a lot of people have those great like auto lights, lights that are really nice and made specifically for crafting. But I think that Not only does this travel with you. So if you're sitting like at your local yarn shop or you're out knitting somewhere and the lighting's not great, this will allow you to get a little bit more focused lighting. Again, particularly if you're using a darker yarn. And I've actually cheated and used them. So during a power outage, I had light so that I could actually knit. Um, my next non-negotiable is try on tubing. And this is what allows me to try on garments that I'm knitting. So these are by the Knitting Barber. So they are commonly referred to as barber cords. There are pearl strings. I forget what they call it, but it's really just this silicone tubing. And you always get a set of them. And normally you get one really long one and then two shorter ones. So the shorter ones are great for putting on sleeves, and this is for, say, the hem of a body. You essentially don't have to take your needles off of the cord. You can slip the end of the cord onto your needle tips. And what it allows you to do is then try the garment on, and then these stitches will travel off the needle onto this. So this way we're not having to put it on waste yarn. We're not having to take all these extra steps to try on a garment so that we can wear it. It's also really great if you're working, say, on a garment, and sometimes it tells you, the pattern will literally tell you, block this before picking up the sleeve stitches, or block this before you pick up for the button band. You can put your live stitches on try-on tubing so that you don't have to put it on waste yarn. You can use this, it's reusable. Then you can block it. This isn't going to, it's not going to rust. It's not going to harm the knitting garment. So I think if you're a garment knitter, try-on tubing is a game changer, because you can check fit, you can check length, you can check everything for whatever you're knitting without losing your stitches. You can, quite honestly, you can go on places like Etsy or whatever, and you can buy a cone of this silicone rope. I know that it is marketed, this try-on tubing is marketed by several different companies, and you'll pay a bit of a premium for something that is pretty basic. I think the two shorter ones in this set are 30 inches, and the bigger cord is 60 inches. I think it's well worth it, but if you want to DIY it, you could certainly buy a cone of this silicone tubing and cut it to whatever lengths that you want. Maybe even have multiple sets if you're working on multiple garments at the same time. The last item is not here in the house. I'll put a picture of it up here, but that is a spin dryer. These are portable dryers that you can purchase. I want to say they, on average, are somewhere between $130 and $200 on like Amazon. Mine is made by Panda, and this is a game changer for helping you block your items. I know a lot of us are taught to go ahead and soak that item and then kind of squeeze but don't wring the water out, and then we roll it in all these towels, and then we lay it out on blocking mats or lay it out on dry towels, like on the floor or on a bed in a spare bedroom. And it takes forever for things to dry because there's so much moisture in that item. And then you can't wear things right away. So a spin dryer, and let's say you're not using a spin dryer, that you're not going out and buying one. Though it's incredibly useful for me as a indie dyer, I don't know that everyone can justify purchasing one. So as alternatives, I think if you have a spin cycle only on your washing machine. I know a lot of the newer, more computerized ones don't have that option. If you have an older washing machine where you can just put it on spin only, this will also work. I know some people have purchased, the biggest like salad spinner they can find. That too will also work. Essentially, what you're doing when we stick something in a spin dryer or you stick it in your washing machine and put it on the spin cycle only, or even in that salad spinner, you are spinning the garment. So that's pulling all that excess water that we can't wring out or get out with towels, so that when you pick it up, it's not dripping. And then you can lay it out to dry. Now, me personally, I use a spin dryer and then I do stick it outside. You do have to be careful with sunlight. Sunlight can fade your garments if I left it out there, say, all day. But for me, I do lay it out on the deck or in the driveway on my blocking mats for about 30 minutes. And typically that sweater is then dry. If it's rainy and I can't do that, then of course I use my dining room table and it might take 24 hours to dry completely. But again, I'm not using a ton of towels. I literally can just take that garment out of the spin dryer and stick it out on my blocking mats. So that gets rid of a ton of laundry. Think about how many towels you go through if you aren't spinning excess water. Here's why spinning won't harm your garments, because I will even spin non-superwash items in my washing machine and even in my spin dryer. And the reason that it's not going to damage it is because on spin cycle only, particularly in like the washing machine or a portable spin dryer, it is sucking that garment to the wall of the machine. So we're not agitating it and there is no heat. So there's no friction being created in getting that excess water out. Now, I would definitely not stick it in a washing machine that's going to try and rinse it first, because then washing machines do tend to agitate a little bit, and I would never trust a machine that way. But if you do have an older model or you do have a computerized one that you can spin only, it's safe to put the garment in there, because again, gravity is going to force it right up against the drum, and then it'll just spin all that excess water out. And those are my 6 go-to knitting supplies that I cannot live without. So let me know in the comments, what are your go-to knitting supplies? Is there something that I didn't list in my 6 tools that you can't live without? I'd love to know what those are. If you liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more yarny goodness, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I'd love for you to join my channel. Until next time, friends, happy knitting.
Always think of you when spring comes, like it's something in the air at that time. Don't know why. Always dream of you when spring comes. It's like the heat on my skin.